Daniel was not a soldier, at least not anymore. He once wore the uniform years ago when Earth first joined the wider galaxy. But after seeing too much blood and too many meaningless fights, he walked away. He preferred machines over politics, wires over weapons, and problems that could be solved with a spanner instead of a rifle. That was why he had chosen to work on a small outpost far from the central trade lanes. It was quiet, almost forgotten, and the only sound that usually filled his days was the hum of the power grid or the clicking of his tools. The outpost lay on the edge of a contested border. Human command had abandoned it long ago, leaving behind only a skeleton crew. Daniel volunteered to stay. The pay was small, but he liked the silence. It was a place where he could fix what was broken, repair old defense grids, and watch the stars without anyone ordering him into a battlefield. But peace rarely lasted on the border. It started with a sound, a low rumble that shook the ground beneath his boots. Daniel looked up from the generator he was repairing. The sky, usually clear and dull, now burned with streaks of light. Ships, dozens of them. He knew right away that these were not friendly patrols. Their shape, sharp and curved like talons, belonged to a species known for their raids, the Voran. Ruthless, desperate, always searching for plunder. Daniel cursed under his breath and ran toward the outpost's central tower. He tried to activate the defense system, but the old controls sparked and died. He knew it was useless. The outpost had been falling apart for years. Against a Voran assault, it was nothing but dust waiting to scatter. Explosions shook the valley. Fire rained down as the Voran ships struck nearby settlements. Daniel could hear the cries of civilians through the comm channels, desperate and panicked. He had seen this before, and though he wanted nothing more than to stay hidden, his body moved on instinct. He grabbed his old sidearm, checked its energy cell, and ran toward the outer fields where the smoke rose. Among the chaos, he saw movement, a small figure stumbling across the rocky ground. At first, he thought it was just another colonist's child, lost in the panic. But as he drew closer, he realized she was different. Her skin shimmered with a faint silver hue, her eyes large and luminous, glowing softly in the dark. She wore a robe that was torn and muddied, but still carried an air of royalty, delicate threads woven with patterns unknown to him. She was not human. The girl was trembling, clutching a broken piece of metal like it was a shield. Behind her, foreign soldiers advanced, their weapons raised. Daniel did not think. He charged forward, shouting to draw their attention. Bolts of energy lit the air, scorching the rocks. He rolled, fired back with his pistol, and managed to drop one of them. The others turned their fire on him, and he felt the burn of heat as a blast skimmed his arm. "Run," he shouted to the girl, though he doubted she understood his language, but she didn't run. She froze, eyes wide with terror. Daniel cursed again and rushed to her. He grabbed her small hand, pulled her close, and positioned himself between her and the attackers. He fired his pistol until it clicked empty. The Voran kept advancing, their snarls echoing. One of them fired straight at the girl. Daniel moved without thought. He wrapped his body around hers, taking the full strike against his back. The force knocked him to his knees. Pain exploded across his body, burning deep into his flesh. He could not breathe for a moment, his vision blurring. But he refused to let go of her. His arms stayed locked around the child, his body shielding her completely. The Voran raised their weapons again, ready to finish the job. But suddenly the sky split with new fire. Bright beams lanced down, tearing into the raiders. Ships unlike any Daniel had seen descended quickly, elegant and radiant, painted with symbols of authority. Alien warriors poured out, their armor gleaming, their weapons far stronger than the Voran rifles. The raiders fled under the sudden assault. Daniel barely registered the noise. He was half-conscious, clinging to the girl who buried her face in his chest. Her small hands clutched at his torn jacket. He could hear her sobbing softly, though the sound felt distant. Then he saw them. Tall figures surrounding him, their armor curved with flowing designs, their faces stern but not cruel. One knelt before him, speaking in a language Daniel couldn't understand. When he didn't respond, They scanned him quickly, their eyes narrowing as they saw the wound across his back. The girl cried something out, her voice desperate, pointing at Daniel. The armored warrior hesitated, then signaled. Within moments, they lifted both Daniel and the girl gently, carrying them toward their waiting ship. His last clear sight before darkness claimed him was the girl's glowing eyes staring at him, filled with fear, sorrow, and something else, an emotion he couldn't name. Daniel awoke to the hum of unfamiliar machines. He was lying on a soft bed, surrounded by light that shifted in calming colors. Strange symbols glowed on the walls, pulsing gently. His body ached, his back heavy with bandages. He tried to sit up, but pain forced him down. There was a sound, a soft voice. He turned his head and saw the girl. She was sitting beside him, her eyes still wide but calmer now. When she saw he was awake, she gave a small smile, shy, uncertain, but grateful. Before Daniel could speak, the doors slid open. More of the armored aliens entered, their posture protective. They looked at him with curiosity, some with suspicion. Then, the air shifted as a taller figure stepped in. She was radiant, her presence commanding the entire room. Her robe flowed like liquid silver, her crown delicate but unmistakable. Her eyes, the same luminous glow as the child's, fixed on him with sharp intensity. Daniel realized who she was. The girl's mother. A queen. The queen studied him in silence for a long moment. Then she spoke in her language, her voice strong, but controlled. The girl rushed to her side, tugging at her hand, pointing again and again at Daniel as if to explain. Daniel couldn't understand the words, but he could see it in their eyes. The girl was telling her mother everything, about how he stood between her and the Voran, about how he shielded her, about how he nearly died for her. The queen's gaze softened, just slightly, but her eyes never left him. Daniel, weak and aching, stared back. He had no idea what would happen next. He only knew one thing. He had changed something today, and whatever he had stepped into, there would be no turning back. Daniel lay quietly in the soft bed of the alien chamber. His body was heavy, each movement slowed by the pain from his wound. The air smelled clean, filled with a faint, sweet fragrance that reminded him of forests after rain. He could hear the hum of strange machines working to heal him, their lights glowing softly around his bed. Though the place was foreign, the little girl's presence gave him some sense of comfort. She had not left his side since they brought him here. Sometimes she would sit silently, watching him with her luminous eyes. Other times, she would whisper words in her own language, as if trying to reassure him. Daniel could not understand her, but he understood the tone. She felt safe around him, and that thought gave him a strength he did not expect. The doors opened again, and the tall queen entered. The moment she stepped inside, the guards straightened. She carried herself with quiet authority, her silver robe flowing like liquid metal in the gentle light. Her crown shimmered, though she wore it not as decoration but as a symbol of command. Her eyes, sharp and bright, studied Daniel carefully. The child rushed to her mother, speaking quickly in their language. She gestured, pointing at Daniel with her small hands, her words filled with energy. Daniel could not understand, but he guessed she was telling the queen again how he had protected her. The queen listened, her face still as stone, but her eyes softened slightly at her daughter's urgency. When the girl finished, the queen placed a hand gently on her head, calming her. Then she turned her gaze back to Daniel. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Daniel felt the weight of her eyes, like she was measuring his soul. He wanted to speak, to explain, but what words could he use? He had acted on instinct, nothing more. He saved the girl because she was a child in danger. To him, it was simple. To them, it was something far greater. The queen spoke at last, her voice calm but strong. The words were foreign, but soon a small device was placed near Daniel's bed. It hummed, translating her speech into his language. "You are human," she said. "A soldier of Earth?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "Not anymore. I was a soldier once, but no longer. I fix things now. Machines. Power grids. That is all. The Queen tilted her head, studying him. And yet you faced the Vorin with nothing but a small weapon. You risked death for a child that was not your own. Why? Daniel let out a faint breath, his body aching as he shifted. Because she was in danger. That is reason enough. No child should face that alone. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger but in thought. She stepped closer, her robe whispering across the floor. Do you know who she is? Daniel glanced at the girl, who was now holding tightly onto her mother's hand. I don't, he admitted. But I know she is important, she matters. That was enough. The Queen's lips curved just slightly, not a smile, but something close to it. She is my daughter, she said, the heir to my people. Without her, our line would end. Her voice lowered, more personal now. And you, a human stranger, chose to stand in death's path for her. Daniel did not answer right away. He met her gaze, steady despite his weakness. Does it matter what species she is? She's a child, that's all I saw. The Queen's eyes lingered on him for a long moment. Then she gave a short nod, as if making a decision. She turned to her guards and spoke in her native tongue. They hesitated but obeyed, bowing slightly before leaving the chamber. Only she, her daughter, and Daniel remained. When the doors closed, she stepped nearer, her presence filling the room. Hear me, human, she said firmly. From this day, you are under my protection. You will not be abandoned. You will not be cast aside. My daughter has chosen you as her protector, and I will not deny her. Whatever your past, you now belong to the house of Aaron. Daniel blinked, stunned by her declaration. Belong? He repeated. The Queen's eyes flashed with certainty. Yes, you risked your life for her. Such a bond cannot be broken. Whether you wish it or not, you are tied to us now. You will remain here, under my care, under my watch. This is my decree. The girl smiled brightly, clapping her hands softly, clearly overjoyed by her mother's words. She ran to Daniel's side, gripping his hand with childlike affection. Daniel looked at her, then at the Queen, unsure what to say. He was a man who had wanted nothing but peace, solitude, and a quiet life with broken machines. Yet in a single day he had stepped into something far greater than himself. He struggled with the words. I don't belong in a palace. I'm no knight, no hero. I'm just a man who happened to be in the wrong place at the right time. The Queen's expression did not change. Perhaps that is what makes you worthy, she said softly. For the first time, Daniel saw not only a ruler in her eyes, but also a mother who had nearly lost her child. Her strength hid her fear, but he could see it in the way her hand still held her daughter's tightly. He looked down, overwhelmed. I don't know what you expect from me. The Queen straightened. I expect nothing but what you already are, a shield for my daughter. The rest will come in time. Her voice carried finality. It was not a request, but a command. The following days tested Daniel's resolve. He remained in the chamber, recovering slowly under the care of alien healers. Their methods were unlike anything on Earth, using light, sound, and strange crystals that pulsed with energy. His pain faded gradually, though weakness still clung to him. During that time, the princess, her name was Liara, rarely left his side. She would bring him small fruits from the palace gardens, showing him how to eat them. She laughed softly when he tried to pronounce her words, patient when he failed. She even drew pictures on a small, glowing tablet, showing crude images of him standing tall against the Vorin. To her, he was not just a stranger. He was her protector. The Queen visited often. She rarely spoke much, but she always observed. Sometimes she would ask questions about humans, about Earth, about why he had chosen exile on a forgotten outpost. Other times she simply stood silently, watching how her daughter leaned against him with trust. Her court, however, was not so easily convinced. Daniel could hear their murmurs in the hallways. They distrusted him. To them, humans were unpredictable. dangerous, too quick to fight and too hard to control. Some nobles even whispered that the queen's judgment had faltered, that her emotions had clouded her reason. Daniel could feel the weight of their suspicion, but when he looked at Liara's smile, when he remembered the fire in the queen's eyes as she declared her protection over him, he knew one thing: he could not walk away. Not now. One evening, as the stars glowed beyond the palace windows, the queen entered his chamber once more. She dismissed the guards with a wave of her hand and approached him directly. "You are restless," she said. Daniel gave a tired smile. "I'm used to fixing things, not sitting in beds. It feels wrong to just lie here while others do all the work." Her eyes studied him closely. "Even wounded, your spirit seeks purpose, that is good. But listen well, Daniel of Earth. You are no longer a man alone on an outpost. You are within my house, tied to my daughter, tied to me. The nobles will test you, they will question your worth. Do not let their doubt break you." Daniel held her gaze. "And if I fail?" Her expression hardened, but her voice was steady. "Then you fail under my banner, and I will not let them touch you. You saved my daughter, human. For that, I owe you a debt that cannot be measured." She paused, her tone softer now. "Whether you realize it or not, you have changed something in this palace, and I will not let you go." Daniel felt the weight of her words settle over him. He had not asked for this. He had not sought it. But fate had bound him to this child, and through her to the queen herself. As Liara curled up beside him, her tiny hand gripping his once more, Daniel finally understood. His quiet life was gone. A new path had been chosen for him, and the queen, in her unyielding resolve, would never allow him to walk away. Daniel's body healed slowly, but his mind healed even slower. Each day he woke in a place that felt too grand for him. Walls of polished stone that glowed faintly, ceilings painted with stars that shimmered like the night sky. Servants moved, quietly, speaking in their soft language, bringing him food that looked strange but tasted better than anything he had eaten in years. Yet, even with all the beauty around him, Daniel felt like an outsider. The palace was filled with rules, traditions, and whispers that he did not understand. Every time he walked through the halls with the princess by his side, he felt dozens of eyes following him. Guards kept their hands near their weapons. Nobles raised their eyebrows, their expressions filled with doubt. But Liara, the princess, did not see him as an outsider. To her, Daniel was her shield, her friend, her hero. Every morning she ran into his chamber before the guards could stop her. She would sit on his bed, showing him little toys that glowed with tiny sparks of light. Sometimes she dragged him out into the gardens, making him chase after glowing insects while she laughed with delight. One evening, she brought him to the palace's grand balcony. The stars stretched endlessly above them, and the air carried a faint chill. Liara held his hand and pointed up at the constellations, speaking in her language, naming each one. Daniel couldn't understand, but he listened anyway. She laughed when he tried to repeat her words, his tongue stumbling over the alien sounds. The queen often watched from the shadows, her eyes calm but sharp. She never stopped Liara from spending time with him, though she always had guards nearby. She was careful, always measuring, always testing. Daniel noticed it. She wanted to know who he truly was, not just a man who saved her daughter once, but the man who might remain by her side. One afternoon, she joined them in the gardens. Daniel had been repairing a broken fountain, its stone cracked and its pipes clogged. He had rolled up his sleeves, sweat on his brow when the queen approached. Her robe shimmered in the sunlight, but her eyes were focused on his hands, rough and steady as they worked. "You fix what is broken," she said, her voice even. Daniel looked up, startled. "It's what I do best." She studied him. "Most men of battle do not bother with broken stones. They leave it to servants." "I'm not most men," he said simply. For a moment her lips curved, almost a smile. "That is true." Liara cheered when the fountain came back to life, water flowing again. She clapped and ran to Daniel, hugging his arm tightly. The queen watched silently, but her eyes softened. That night, however, Daniel learned that not everyone was pleased with his presence. A group of nobles gathered in the council chamber. Daniel was not meant to be there, but Liara had dragged him along, insisting he sit near her. The chamber was filled with tall figures in elegant robes, their voices sharp, their eyes narrow as they looked at him. One of the nobles, a man with golden markings on his forehead, stood and addressed the queen. "My queen, this human does not belong here. He is an outsider. His presence dishonors our traditions." Another nodded quickly. "Yes. He is no warrior of our people. He cannot stand in the palace of kings and queens. Already rumors spread that you have grown too close to him." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, but before he could speak, the queen raised her hand. The chamber fell silent. "Enough," she said firmly. Her voice echoed, leaving no space for argument. "This man saved my daughter. He stood when others would have fled. He is here because I will it. Question not his worth, for it has been proven." The nobles exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared to speak further. Daniel felt the queen's gaze on him, strong, unyielding. She was defending him against her own court. For reasons he could not fully understand, she was tying his fate to hers, and she refused to let them break that bond. After the council ended, Daniel walked back through the palace halls with Liara skipping happily beside him. Yet his mind was heavy. He turned when he heard the queen's footsteps behind him. She walked with her usual grace, her eyes unreadable. "You heard their doubts," she said quietly. "Yes," Daniel admitted, "and they're not wrong. I don't belong here. I'm human. I don't understand your ways, your rules." The queen stopped, turning to face him. "Perhaps you do not, but you understand something they have forgotten." Her eyes glimmered. "You understand sacrifice. That is worth more than all their polished words." Daniel had no answer. He only nodded, unsure what path lay before him. The days passed, and the bond between Daniel and Liara grew even stronger. She followed him everywhere, her laughter filling the palace halls. The servants began to smile when they saw them together. Even the guards softened, lowering their suspicion little by little, but the nobles were not done. Rumors continued to grow. Some whispered that the queen was allowing her heart to cloud her judgment. Others muttered that a human should never stand so close to the throne. One night Daniel stood at the balcony again, staring at the stars. His thoughts were heavy. He had wanted peace. He had wanted a quiet life, far away from politics and battles. But fate had placed him here, in the center of power, with the eyes of an entire kingdom watching his every move. He heard the sound of footsteps and turned. The queen stepped beside him, her gaze lifting to the stars as well. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Why do you keep me here even when it causes you trouble?" The queen's eyes did not leave the sky. "Because you saved what I could not lose," she said softly. Then she turned to him, her voice firm again. "And because I see strength in you even when you do not see it yourself. That is why I refuse to let you go." Daniel felt the weight of her words. A strange warmth spread through him, not just of duty, but of something deeper, a connection he had never expected. As Liara appeared behind them, yawning and rubbing her eyes, Daniel picked her up gently. She rested her head on his shoulder, her trust complete. The queen watched, her expression unreadable, yet her eyes lingered on him. And in that quiet moment, Daniel realized something. His life was no longer his own. He was bound to this child, to this queen, to this people. And though danger still lurked beyond the palace walls, one truth had become clear. The bond between them was growing stronger each day. The palace had grown quieter in recent days. Daniel was recovering well now, strong enough to walk through the great halls without leaning on the walls for support. Liara still clung to his side wherever he went, as though afraid he might disappear if she let him go. The queen continued to watch him carefully, but her eyes no longer carried suspicion. Instead, there was something steadier there, trust and perhaps even respect. But peace was never meant to last long. The Voren had not forgotten their defeat on the border. Their first attack had failed, but it had not broken them. Word reached the palace that a much larger strike was coming. Entire fleets had been seen gathering beyond the outer moons, and their leaders swore revenge against the queen's family. The palace grew tense. Guards doubled their patrols. Nobles argued endlessly in the council chamber, demanding stricter defenses. Some even suggested moving the princess to a secret safehold, far away from the capital. But the queen's voice silenced them all. "My daughter will not be hidden," she declared. "She will see the strength of her people. She will not live in shadows." Daniel stood in the corner of the chamber, silent as always, but her words stirred something inside him. He knew what was coming. He had seen it too many times before. A raid was one thing. A full assault was something else entirely. That night, as the palace slept uneasily, Daniel sat awake on the balcony outside his room. He looked at the stars, each one sharp and cold. He thought of Earth, of the wars he had left behind, of the quiet life he had tried to build. And now here he was again, about to be dragged into another storm. The sound of small footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. Liara padded onto the balcony, her silver eyes glowing softly in the dark. She climbed into his lap without asking, resting her head against his chest. "Can't sleep?" Daniel asked softly, even though she couldn't understand all his words. She shook her head and clutched his shirt tighter. In her own tongue, she whispered a single word. He didn't know what it meant, but he understood the feeling behind it. Fear. Daniel wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "I'll keep you safe," he murmured, "no matter what happens." The following evening, the storm finally came. The first warning was the distant roar of engines echoing through the skies. Then the alarms blared across the city, deep horns shaking the palace walls. Guards shouted orders, rushing to their posts. From the high balconies, Daniel could see the dark shapes of Vorine ships breaking through the clouds like a swarm of predators. The Tar palace trembled as the first blasts rained down, shields held glowing with blue light, but the force shook the ground. Inside the palace, chaos erupted. Servants rushed to safety. Guards formed lines around the queen and her daughter. Daniel found himself pushed into the middle of the crowd, but his instincts screamed at him to move. He could not just stand and wait. "Stay with me," he told Liara, gripping her hand tightly. The queen, standing tall despite the panic, turned to him. "They will come for her," she said firmly. "They will not stop until she is theirs." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then they'll have to go through me first." The attack grew worse. Explosions lit the horizon, shaking the palace windows. Suddenly, a group of Vorin fighters breached the outer defenses. Their craft slammed into the courtyards, and soldiers poured out, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Daniel pulled Liara behind him as the guards rushed to fight. The clash of metal and the hiss of plasma filled the halls. He could see the queen herself drawing a long, curved blade, leading her warriors with fierce grace. She moved like fire, striking with precision, her robe flowing behind her. But then, Daniel saw what he feared most: two assassins slipping through the chaos, moving fast toward the inner chamber where Liara had been hidden. His heart pounded. Without thinking, he sprinted after them. He caught up just as they broke through the door. Liara screamed as the assassins raised their blades. Daniel slammed into the first one, driving him into the wall. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he didn't stop. He grabbed a fallen staff from the floor and swung it wildly, blocking the second assassin's strike. The room echoed with the clash of weapons. Daniel fought with desperation, not skill. Every strike of the assassins was sharper, faster, but his body moved with a single purpose: to shield the child. He used the staff like a shield, absorbing blow after blow, his arms burning with effort. One blade slashed across his side, tearing his shirt, blood soaking through. He stumbled, but he refused to fall. "Run, Liara," he shouted. But she didn't run. She cried out in her own language, her voice breaking, refusing to leave him. The second assassin lunged, his blade aimed for Daniel's chest. At the last moment, Daniel twisted, taking the strike across his arm instead. Pain exploded, but he used the moment to drive the staff into the assassin's chest, knocking him backward. The first assassin rose again, snarling, But before he could strike, the doors burst open. The queen stormed in, her blade flashing like lightning. With 2 swift strikes, the assassins fell. Silence filled the room, broken only by Liara's sobs. Daniel collapsed to his knees, his chest heaving, blood dripping from his wounds. Liara rushed to him, throwing her arms around his neck. The queen stood over them, her breathing heavy, her blade dripping. For a moment, her mask of strength cracked. Her eyes widened as she saw the wounds covering Daniel's body. "You fool," she whispered, though her voice trembled. She knelt beside him, placing her hand over one of his wounds. "Why do you keep doing this?" Daniel gave a weak smile, his vision blurring. "Because she's worth it." Her eyes searched his face, and for the first time, he saw something more than command in them. Something warmer, deeper. The battle outside continued, but for that moment, the queen's world narrowed to the man before her, and the daughter he had saved once again. When the guards finally secured the palace, the Vorin driven back, the queen gave her final order. "Take him to the healers," she commanded. "He will not die. I forbid it." As they carried Daniel away, Liara clung to his hand, refusing to let go, and the queen followed close behind, her heart heavier than it had ever been. For she knew, now without doubt, that this human had changed everything. He was no longer just a stranger. He had become something far more dangerous, someone her heart could not afford to lose. Daniel's world was a haze of pain and faint light. He drifted in and out of sleep, hearing voices he could not understand. Sometimes he woke to see alien healers bending over him, their hands glowing with strange crystals that pulsed against his skin. Other times he felt the warmth of a small hand clutching his own, Liara refusing to leave. Days passed in this blur, and slowly the pain eased. His body felt stronger, though still heavy with exhaustion. One morning, when he finally opened, his eyes fully, he saw Liara curled up asleep on the chair beside his bed. Her silver hair fell across her face, her chest rising and falling gently. Daniel reached out weakly, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. She stirred, her luminous eyes blinking open. When she saw him awake, her face lit with joy. She jumped into his arms, hugging him tightly. "You're safe," Daniel whispered, though his throat was dry. "I told you I'd keep you safe." The doors opened then, and the queen entered. She looked different. Her posture was as strong as ever, but her eyes held a quiet storm inside them. She dismissed the guards with a single motion. For a moment, she just stood there, looking at him, at her daughter clinging to him. "You should be dead," she said finally, her voice low but steady. "The wounds you took, no man should have survived them." Daniel gave a faint smile. "I've been told I'm too stubborn to die." The queen stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "Twice now you have thrown yourself between my daughter and death. Twice you have bled so that she may live. Tell me, Daniel of Earth, why?" Daniel's smile faded. He looked at Liara, then back at the queen. "Because no child should grow up fearing the world because she's innocent. And because, when I saw her cry, I couldn't stand by. I couldn't let her be taken." The queen's eyes softened, though her voice remained firm. "You speak as if you were bound to her by fate." "Maybe I am," Daniel admitted quietly. The queen said nothing for a long moment. Then she turned and walked to the window, her robe flowing behind her. The stars outside glowed brightly, though many still bore the scars of the recent battle. She placed her hand against the glass, her reflection shimmering. "When the Varan attacked, many of my nobles fled to safe places, but you, a human outsider, stayed. You bled for her, and for that you have earned more than their loyalty." She turned back to him, her eyes fierce now. "You have earned mine." Daniel shifted, uneasy with the weight of her words. "Your Majesty, I'm just a man. I didn't do this for reward. I don't want power. I don't want titles." Her gaze locked onto his. "And that is why I trust you more than them. Power is all they seek. But you seek nothing, yet you give everything. Liara tugged at her mother's robe then, pointing at Daniel and speaking in her own tongue. Daniel didn't understand the words, but he could guess. She was telling her mother she wanted him to stay. The queen's lips pressed into a thin line. She reached down, smoothing her daughter's hair. "Yes," she murmured softly. Then she looked at Daniel again, her voice stronger. "You will not leave. I will not allow it." Daniel blinked in surprise. "What?" The queen stepped closer, her presence commanding, but her eyes carried warmth now instead of cold authority. "You belong here now. Not as a prisoner, not as a servant, but as protector of my daughter, and as part of my house. I claim you under my banner. No one will take you from me." Daniel's chest tightened. "Why me? You have armies. You have warriors stronger than I'll ever be. Why tie your fate to mine?" "Because they fight out of duty," the queen answered. "You fight out of heart." Her voice softened. "And because, though I did not expect it, you have become more than I can let go." Silence hung between them, heavy and full. Daniel looked down, struggling with the weight of her words. He had never wanted to be bound to anyone again. He had run from the chaos of war to find peace. But here, in this palace, he had found something else. Liara curled against him, her tiny hand gripping his as though afraid he might vanish. The queen stood before him, her eyes unyielding yet filled with something he could not name. For the first time in years, Daniel realized he wasn't alone. The following days confirmed the queen's resolve. When the council gathered again, the nobles argued loudly about the human's place. "He is dangerous," one said. "He is unworthy," said another, but the queen silenced them with a single declaration. "This man is under my protection. He is the shield of my daughter. Any who question his place, question me." The nobles fell silent, their protests dying in their throats. None dared challenge her openly. Daniel stood quietly at the edge of the chamber, feeling the weight of every gaze. He hated the attention, hated being the cause of division. But when he saw Liara smiling at him from her seat beside the throne, and when he saw the queen's steady eyes on him, he knew he could not walk away. That night the queen visited him again. She dismissed the guards and entered his chamber alone. The air was heavy with quiet, the kind of quiet that carried meaning. "You have changed my palace," she said softly. "You have changed me." Daniel looked at her, unsure what to say. She stepped closer, her silver robe brushing the floor. "When I first saw you, I thought you were just a reckless man who happened to save my daughter. But now I see you are more. You are proof that strength is not only in bloodlines or crowns. It is in choices. And you, Daniel, have chosen again and again to give, even when it cost you dearly." She stopped in front of him, her eyes searching his. "Do you understand now why I refused to let you go?" Daniel swallowed hard. His life had been one of running, from battles, from duties, from ties that bound him. But now, he felt something different. He felt roots forming in a place he never expected. "I understand," he whispered. The queen's gaze softened, and for the first time, she smiled. A real smile, warm and unguarded. "Then stay. Stay, not because you are bound by my command, but because you are bound by choice." Daniel looked at her, then at Liara sleeping peacefully nearby. He thought of the day he had thrown himself in front of fire for the girl. He thought of the queen's voice, strong and unyielding, standing against her own counsel for him. He thought of the bond that had formed, not chosen, but given. And he realized he could not leave, even if he wanted to. "I'll stay," he said, finally. The queen's smile deepened and she bowed her head slightly, not as a ruler to a subject, but as a woman acknowledging truth. From that day forward, Daniel was no longer just the human outsider. He became protector of the princess, shield of the queen, and part of a family he had never expected to find. The palace no longer whispered about his presence. Instead, they whispered about the bond that had changed their queen. And as the stars burned above, Daniel knew that his life had taken a path he could never have imagined. He had shielded a child once, and in doing so, had found something far greater: a home.